Hi, this is David Miller, and I'm here with the third in a series of mini lectures on Jane Austen's Pride and Prejudice. Today we're going to pick up from the end of the last lecture and talk about what I called reading backwards. Now, as I was saying at the end of the last mini lecture, obviously the wit and the superior understanding that make us like Mr. Bennet at first are not bad things in themselves, for all of my criticism of the way he uses them. In the world of Jane Austen's novels, these are indispensable social and psychological skills. And what I find interesting is they are also the distinguishing marks of the novel itself as opposed to its characters. We can see this in the famous opening sentence, so often quoted and analyzed. The tone of this declaration is decidedly ironic. Sounds a little bit like Mr. Bennet himself, doesn't it? Or perhaps like Elizabeth? If you watch the BBC film version of this novel, you might notice that the screenplay doesn't use any voiceover, and this, of course, effectively eliminates the role of the narrator. But the film doesn't want to sacrifice that famous opening line, so it gives an edited version of the line to Lizzie herself. And this transfer works because her style of speaking, and her father's, have so much in common with that of the anonymous narrator. The most obvious feature of the style they share is irony in the form of counterstatement, saying the opposite of what one means. Thus, what the narrator calls a truth universally acknowledged is precisely the opposite. Not a truth, but a desire. Not acknowledged, but vehemently asserted. Not universal, but decidedly partial and local, the wishful thinking of a small neighborhood full of unmarried girls whose sell-by date is rapidly approaching. The truth of this counterstatement can be decoded, then, by reading backward from its desire. So, for a single man, read a single woman. For in possession, read in need. For must be in want, read must gain possession. And for of a wife, read of a husband. Only one phrase, of good fortune, remains the same and serves as the fulcrum on which the rest of the statement pivots to read, it is a desire locally asserted that a single woman in need of a good fortune must gain possession of a husband. Let me suggest that the novel's opening scene is a kind of reading lesson. The purpose of this lesson is to introduce us to the special skill that I have referred to, a little bit tongue-in-cheek, as reading backward. This is the skill we will need in order to decode irony when it appears as counterstatement, but it's also the skill that both we and the novel's characters will need if we're ever to succeed in penetrating the various disguises worn by desire when it asserts itself as truth. This is what I take to be the central theme of the novel, and I'll have more to say about it in the next few lectures. For now, let me just say that this skill, the ability to unmask desire, whether in ourselves or others, when it masquerades as truth, this is the one skill Jane Austen thinks we need in order to get companionate marriage right, in order to be successful in life as affective individualists who must make our way as family members and as social creatures. That's why I find it so interesting that Austen, having adopted this ironic style and tone for her omniscient narrator, should proceed to isolate it and exaggerate it in two of her characters. First in Mr. Bennet, and then later, at the opening of chapter 4 to be precise, in Lizzie, who mimics her father's style perfectly when she observes that Bingley is handsome, which a young man ought to be if he possibly can. His character is thereby complete. What we see in lines like this is that father and daughter both adopt the tone of amused omniscience that belongs to Austen's narrator. And yet, while they adopt the tone, they lack the narrator's objectivity. And I think this is crucial, so I want to close by identifying it as the third contradiction at the heart of Austen's fiction. The first one, and I know you'll remember this because it was in the mini-lecture, is between love and property as a basis for marriage. The second is between passion and judgment in the conduct of courtship. This third contradiction is between points of view, between the individual and the omniscient narrator. The idea of a universal and objective point of view is made pretty real for us in the narrator's omniscience, as Mrs. Bennet is to her husband, blind, partial, and absurd, so all the characters are, at least to some extent, to the impersonal objective narrator, who speaks as if completely detached from the world and yet at the same time intimately familiar with it. This narrator, so impersonal we cannot say whether the voice is male or female, aristocratic or common, married or unmarried, knows everyone and sees everything with perfect clarity. It is one of the deep paradoxes in Jane Austen's work that this narrative voice, which itself has none of the distinguishing traits of individuality, should nevertheless define the ideal of social and psychological awareness to which individual characters must aspire if they are to be good and happy in the end. It is almost as if the lesson we must learn is that true happiness is possible for individuals only to the extent that we can manage to transcend all of the specific qualities and limitations that make us individuals in the first place. No wonder it's so hard to get affective individualism right.